In the Middle Ages, there existed a festival so unusual that, upon hearing about it for the first time, a modern person might doubt it ever truly happened. It was a day when the entire established order was turned upside down, when authority lost its weight, and a beggar could laugh in the face of a king. A day when solemn religious rituals transformed into satire, and the most dignified, devout faces donned jesters' caps. This was the Feast of Fools, noisy, daring, filled with laughter and crude jokes, yet carrying a deeper meaning understood by everyone who took part. To picture it, we must travel back to 14th or 15th century Europe. Narrow streets paved with uneven cobblestones smell of smoke, fresh bread, and dampness. Houses loom over each other, their upper floors jutting so far that in certain alleys, you could almost touch the opposite building with an outstretched hand. Wooden shutters line the windows, and from them peer curious townsfolk, eager for the spectacle to begin. From afar, a strange noise is already drifting in: drums, whistles, the jingling of bells, shouting. The city is preparing for a day that will shatter every familiar rule. The origins of the Feast of Fools stretch deep into the past. Many historians trace it to the Roman Saturnalia, a festival in honor of the god Saturn, during which masters and slaves swapped roles. The wealthy feasted the poor, and street games and jokes ran rampant. Christianity, spreading across Europe, could not entirely stamp out these traditions, and so they morphed into something new, a carnival that usually fell between Christmas and the Feast of Epiphany. On this day, things could happen inside churches that in ordinary times would have been unthinkable. Priests and even canons dressed in absurd costumes, fools' caps, animal masks, women's dresses. Instead of solemn hymns, parody songs rang out, and prayers were delivered in exaggerated accents or replaced by deliberate gibberish. Sometimes the clergy staged entire performances, mocking not only themselves but also their congregations. In some places, instead of incense, the censers were filled with ashes or, according to some chroniclers, even manure, a grotesque symbol that on this day, the sacred could be fully turned upside down. In the streets, true chaos reigned. Early in the morning, processions began. People wore the strangest garments they could find. Some turned their tunics or gowns inside out. Others wore crowns made from turnips and cabbages. Some masks were downright frightening: long crooked noses, huge ears, grotesque grins. Others were comical and absurd, with tongues lolling out and eyes looking in different directions. The central figure of the feast was often the so-called Pope of Fools or Bishop of Misrule. He was chosen from the common folk, artisans, apprentices, sometimes even beggars. He was seated on an improvised throne, crowned with paper or a wreath of straw, then paraded through the city on a cart or on the back of a donkey. The crowd obeyed his commands, no matter how ridiculous. He might order everyone to sing instead of speaking, to hop on one leg, to dance around a well, or to address neighbors only in rhyme. The feast was a time of total role reversal. Guards pretended to be drunk, and beggars bossed around the guards. Merchants shouted indecent jokes in the marketplace, and children played tricks on adults. Sometimes mock trials were held, where wealthy townsfolk or city officials stood as the accused, while shopkeepers or street musicians acted as judges. Food and drink flowed freely. In the squares, great barrels of beer and wine were set out for anyone to enjoy. Bakers and butchers handed out pies, roasted geese, grilled meats, and sweets. In some cities, heralds proclaimed beforehand that it was forbidden to charge money for food on that day. Everything had to be free, at least until sunset. With the joy came unrestrained rowdiness. Drunken fights were common. Mischief makers smeared soot on passers-by, poured water over their heads, or pelted them with rotten eggs. Dancing and singing were often accompanied by body gestures, and for church leaders, This was one of the main reasons to condemn the feast. And yet, despite these excesses, the Feast of Fools served an important social function. Medieval life was harsh and rigid. Laws, taxes, war, disease all weighed heavily on people's shoulders. One day a year when you could laugh at authority, at sanctity, and even at yourself, was a genuine release valve for the community. People felt that at least once a year, they could be free of their usual chains. In France, particularly in Paris, the Feast of Fools reached its greatest splendor. In the cathedral square, wooden stages were erected for satirical plays mocking bishops, judges, and kings. Sometimes actors portrayed the townspeople themselves, imitating their mannerisms and speech. In the German lands, processions were long and loud, often ending with the burning of huge effigies symbolizing human vices. In England, the festival could include street games such as pie-eating contests or stone-throwing competitions. By the late 15th and early 16th centuries, however, the church and civic authorities increasingly sought to restrict or ban the Feast of Fools. They accused it of encouraging debauchery, drunkenness, and blasphemy. Some reformers believed it undermined the authority of both religion and government. Gradually, with the arrival of the Reformation and changing social morals, the festival began to fade. By the 17th century, it had all but disappeared, surviving only in a few rural areas as a form of Shrovetide revelry. And yet its memory lived on. Its spirit can be recognized in later European carnivals, especially those preceding Lent. Even today, some historical reenactment groups attempt to revive the atmosphere of the Feast of Fools, with its noise, laughter, role reversals, and that intoxicating sense of complete freedom, if only for one day. The Feast of Fools was more than just a celebration. It was a reminder that even in the most rigid and somber of times, people need space for laughter and defiance. That laughter can dissolve fear, and that a world turned upside down can sometimes help keep the real one in balance. And perhaps it was precisely such days when anything was permitted, that allowed the Middle Ages to breathe amidst their own strictness.